Here's Mike Winters.
And good morning. It is 7:27, and joining us in studio this morning from all the way up on the fourth floor here in the J.P. White Building, Matt Bristol with Bristol Law Office. Good morning, Matt.
Morning, Mike. How you doing?
Doing well. How about yourself?
Doing good. You have a good weekend?
Had a good weekend, and I got to. I like I said, I didn't really get a chance to watch USFL stuff and debut, but I don't know. It looked like it'll. I don't know. We'll see how it works out, but.
Well, I watched the Masters.
Yeah, that's where most people, I think, were watching. They're watching sports this weekend. They're probably watching Masters coverage.
And the committee that runs the Masters, I mean, they rule with an iron fist.
Yeah.
So you might have heard a long time ago, they had a tree that was in the middle of one fairway right in front of the green. It was called the Eisenhower tree.
Okay.
Well, after he's president, Dwight Eisenhower bought a house on the Masters golf course.
Oh, okay.
So you can buy a house on the Masters golf course, but you don't own it.
Wow.
They own it.
Okay.
So there's this tree that was in the middle of the fairway in front of the green. Used to drive Eisenhower crazy. So they were having a board meeting one time, and he's going to go talk to him about moving that tree. And so he knocks on the door and says, "Hi, guys. I was wondering if you had a minute." And the committee says, "Mr. President, you can't be here."
Oh.
He says, "Well, I want to talk to you about that tree. We're having a board meeting, Mr. President. You're not allowed to be here."
Wow.
They kicked him out.
I'm the president of the United States.
Yeah.
You know? Well, he was a big golfer because
He was.
He had a home. I think his main residence after his presidency was he bought some property up in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania.
Oh, is that
and
right?
he owns actually a palatial estate, or owned, I should say, maybe the Eisenhower family, but you know what I mean. He owned a palatial estate literally right up on the Gettysburg battlefield property there. And matter of fact, you can go tour it. And if you're actually like on Little Round Top and certain other places of the battlefield, you can see the Eisenhower estate, which, by the way, he had a couple hole golf course. Like he had a 3-hole golf course he had built around his house just so he can whack the ball around a little bit when he's not on the golf course. So he was a big golfer too, on top of being a pretty good president in general and everything else too.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
So after they kicked him out of the meeting, they decided to vote to name the tree the Eisenhower tree.
Nice.
And that way he couldn't complain about taking it down.
Well, yeah, because now it's officially
named after him,
a
right?
landmark of him, sort of now.
So when Eisenhower did pass away, they told Mamie she had 3 days to get out. And sure enough, on the third day, they're knocking on her door.
Wow.
Yeah.
They wouldn't let her stay?
Because they're like, it's the military. You got 3 days mourning, and that's it. You're done.
Yeah, wow.
Those guys are tough.
I think the president, or a former president at that time, would have got a little bit more grace period. But
you would think.
I mean, they do have a staple of Secret Service that follows them around. You'd think that would cut them a little bit more time,
Yeah, those guys are...
Point is, don't tick off the people at the Masters.
They have their own world. And they're
Even
in
if you're
charge.
president, they still get you.
Oh, yeah.
But, well, for folks that aren't aware, Matt just didn't always give us good facts and awesome golf tips. But he does join us to talk Sage Legal Advice every month. And we'll talk things from, financial planning to estate planning to just keeping an eye on things. So when things happen down the road that turn out to be a problem for you, those problems are much more navigable if you're prepared for them. A lot of the talk we talk about, there's a lot of that. So.
Yeah, a lot of preparation.
Yeah.
So today I thought we'd kind of talk generally about kind of real estate and the county offices that are involved in real estate, because a lot of people are kind of confused about that stuff.
Yeah. Well, you're going to make a lot of trips. Anytime you're buying property or having to do, at the assessors, clerk's office, these are places that you're going to be, property owners frequently have to visit and things, especially if you're doing like as a business, flipping houses, things like that. You're probably spending a lot of time at the clerk's and the assessor's office and things like that, getting various things done.
Yeah, so a lot of times, depending on the work that I do, I'll say, well, I need a copy of the deed to your house. So maybe it's a transfer on death deed to avoid probate, something like that. And so people say, well, they're not sure if they have a deed or not. So what's my next question?
Better find out.
Well, I ask them,
have you been to the...
how are you purchasing your house?
Gotcha.
Do you have a mortgage, or do you have buying it on a real estate contract, owner
Gotcha.
finance?
Gotcha.
And so if they say, oh, I've got a mortgage, then I say, then you necessarily have a deed.
Yeah.
So the way that works is when you borrow the money to buy the house, you give the house as collateral, right?
Yeah.
Well, you got to be the owner of the house to give it as collateral.
Right. You can't give something as collateral something you don't own.
Right. So you got a deed to the house. So in order for you to give the house as collateral. So I'll tell them, yeah, you got the deed somewhere. If you can't find it, the county has a copy of it.
Okay. Does the bank usually keep a copy of the deed when you're owning on it?
They may have a copy of the deed for regulatory purposes.
Gotcha.
So they have internal auditors and then state auditors and federal auditors.
Gotcha.
So they probably have a copy of the deed for the auditor purposes.
I didn't know if is that something they would give to you if you asked for them? I would think they would, but I didn't know if there's any confidentiality things or something that prevents them. That
your loan, your file, they'd give you a copy, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Now, whether they find it or not is another question.
Sure. Yeah, obviously going to the clerk's office or the assessor, rather, is you're probably, because they're guaranteed to have it.
Yes.
That's kind of their job, is to keep things like that.
It is. Thank goodness. What's the clerk's job anyway?
Yeah.
And then sometimes they'll say, oh, okay, yeah, I'll bring Matt a copy of the deed. And what they bring me is the tax assessment.
Okay.
And I'll tell them, no, this isn't a copy of the deed. This is a tax assessment. And so people are kind of fuzzy on that. And I tell them, well, you know, that doesn't have a proper legal description, number one, so I can't use it. And number two, the way your name appears in the assessment may or may not be the way it appears on the deed.
Gotcha.
And we have to track that exactly.
Okay.
But the good news is a lot of times the assessment has the book and page where the deed was recorded.
So it's a clue if you don't have the deed.
It's a clue.
Yeah, gotcha.
So I'll circle it on the paper and say, see this right here? Yeah, go down to the clerk's office, not the assessor's office.
And I'm guessing when on their organizational side, that number or that what they're giving you is going to be like the key to find for the clerk's office to find it relatively easily. So.
Oh yeah. Now back in the day, like 20s and 30s, the county records had deed records in one place. They had mortgage records another place. They had oil and gas leases in another place. They had judgments in another place. They had miscellaneous index in another place. I mean, it was just a nightmare. Because if you were running title on land or minerals, you had to look in all the different places, or else you might miss something.
Yeah.
But nowadays, everything's on one central location, so it's very nice.
I'm very curious, and this is probably more of a clerk's question than your question, but what are they going to do down the road? Because obviously they keep paper records of all these things, and you always talk about never put the clerk's office on the top floor because it's gonna, because all the records they keep gonna, weight down the building. You know what I mean? But we're living in a digital age and clouds, and a lot of this stuff is, I'm sure, in a digital format or is
Yes.
being put in a digital format.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
I'm just wondering what's going to happen with all this paperwork. I mean, at some point, are they going to destroy it? Are they going to have to keep them in warehouses in the middle of nowhere someplace? I'm always just wondering what's going to happen with this.
Don't know. I think at the courthouse.
Yeah.
Okay, and a lot of people confuse the courthouse with the county complex.
Yeah, two different buildings.
Yeah, but the courthouse, they have been digitizing some of the old cases. At first, they were putting on microfiche, 15, 20 years ago.
Now that's outdated.
Yeah, that's outdated. But the clerk's office is digitized. A lot of the information the clerk's office has is online.
Yeah.
A lot of the assessor's records are online. It's difficult to look up the assessor's records by address because if you're just one little something off, you have return no record.
Yeah.
So if you were looking up Mike Winters on the assessor's records and by street name, and if you just got it a tad wrong, it'd say no records.
Right.
Mike didn't own anything.
You officially don't own a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's something I come across sometimes is people say, well, they're fussing about granddad's house and they were supposed to get it, but the other uncle got it. And the assessor's records say the bad uncle's the owner. And I'll tell them that's not what the assessor's records say. What the tax assessor does is they assess taxes. Mm-hmm. And the treasurer actually collects the taxes.
Gotcha.
So all the assessor does is assess taxes. So if somebody goes in the office and says, hey, assessor, assess me these taxes because I want to pay them, they'll say, fine, great, we'll change our records.
They don't care who pays the taxes. They just want the taxes paid.
Yeah.
So in essence, if you better get your names right, or you just might have helped somebody else out.
But a lot of people think, well, but the assessor says so-and-so is the owner. That must mean they're the owner. It's
Right.
like, no, the county clerk is the official record of ownership.
Gotcha. So if you're, so you need to make sure you're paying on the right thing, and you're not. If there's some question there, maybe you should go visit the clerk's office first before you go cut a check to the assessor.
Go check.
Yeah.
Or if you're going to buy a piece of property, you want to check the county clerk's records.
Sure.
If you're looking for your deed, it's the county clerk that has the official record of ownership.
Sure.
Um,
But yeah, I
ahead.
think I was going to say, I think a lot of people, when we talk county, because most people, when we speak of the clerk's office, it's usually around election time, so voter registry. So most people think of the clerk as the voting representative, which by all means that's very much part of that.
Here's one of the jobs.
But when there's not election stuff going on, they're dealing with who owns what, and we keeping the deeds to this, and who's legit and who's not legit. Basically, that's kind of what they're doing when they're not running and certifying elections.
The probate court is also located in the county clerk's office. It's a part-time clerk, part-time court. The probate judge is a part-time job. They have probate forms for people who want to try and do their own probate stuff. They're required to keep their records in chronological order. Now, they do have a cross-reference by name,
Okay,
but that's not always guaranteed to be correct.
gotcha.
So if you
So dates are much more important than names in that world.
it's all chronology.
Gotcha. Interesting.
Yeah. So if you really want to know the history of a particular piece of property or everything about a particular piece of property, that's when you would go to a title company.
Gotcha.
Because the title companies keep their records by legal description.
Okay.
And so every day, everything that's recorded in the county clerk's office, the title company goes and gets a copy of it
Wow.
digitally. And then they go back to their office and they look at all the legal descriptions and they start cross-referencing everything. So it's a lot of work those guys do.
I imagine. Yeah. Kind of interesting. But that's when we talk about the legal world, we always talk about, why things are done a certain way. And this is kind of more of that, seeing why behind the scenes here. It's kind of like whenever you see, like in the newspaper or hear on the radio, like some business has to do some change to their operations or something. And if it impacts the public, they got to do public notice, and where it's in, a lot of the work that what's going on at the clerk's office is kind of the same kind of deal. I mean, even if it's not direct, talking about oil company X has to tell the public because they're going to do an adjustment to a tank or something, but it's the same principle where, the legalities and where, and if you want to know, well, if company X did this, where do you go to look for that? When it comes to property, it's really the clerk's office. That's where you do it. If you're if you gee whiz curious, you're seeing a piece of property sitting out there, like, who owns that thing? If you want to find out, guess where you go? You go to the clerk's office. That's public record, on who owns land and and things like that. And so if you're wanting to know, or if you're looking to purchase, or you want to know who a neighbor is out in the middle of nowhere, that's how you find out. So.
Yeah. You can go to the assessor. If you want to know who owns it, you can go to the assessor or the clerks.
Mm-hmm.
You can use a name or an address. You can just say, hey, there's this address, and I'm thinking a lot, and I'm interested in buying it. Who owns it?
Mm-hmm.
And so they'll have that property. Of course, if you don't pay your taxes, guess what happens? Eventually, the state or the county will put your property up for sale.
Yep.
So I had folks that'll buy those properties at tax sales, and then they fix it up and they try to sell it, and the title company tells them no title insurance. A tax sale is not marketable title.
Wow.
Yeah. Holy cats. They didn't know that when they bought it.
So how do you rectify that?
Well, that's when the title company says, no title insurance, go talk to Matt.
Okay.
So they come talk to Matt and they say, what do I do? How come I'm doing this? And I bought it at the sale, and what's the problem? And well, the answer is when they sell it for taxes, they don't do a whole lot of research. There's not really a whole lot of due process for that landowner. And so now we have to do due process, go look for them. And then if we can't find them, then we got to talk to them.
Okay.
Can't find them, then we have what's called a quiet title suit. We publish against them in the paper. Because On the exact opposite, I had a guy come in one time and he says, hey, the county or the state sold my vacant lot at a tax sale, and they didn't tell me, and whine. And I said, okay, I'm listening and talking to him. I said, so you live here in town? He goes, oh, yeah. I said, do you own any other real estate in town? He goes, oh, yeah, I got 5 other pieces of real estate. So it's like, oh, so all the assessor had to do was look up your name, and they could have found you.
Yeah, very
Send you the
easily.
tax bill.
Wasn't like some guy that lives 3 states over.
No.
Yeah. Which is the story you hear a lot of times when you hear like a derelict property or
Right.
something that the city or the county wants to take over. It's usually,
And
the guy who owns it lives in Brazil.
Right. Yeah, California.
Yeah.
Or 2 generations ago.
Yeah.
But no, here's this guy, lived in Roswell, had other pieces of real estate. They could have found him if they'd looked for him, but they didn't look for him. So that's why tax sale doesn't carry marketable title. They don't spend a whole lot of time and effort looking for folks.
So just out of gee whiz curiosity, that guy, does he have any kind of recourse there? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
okay.
Yeah, he has to, whoever bought it, he has to pay them back.
Okay.
Because, they paid the taxes essentially on it.
Gotcha.
If they made any improvements, he has to reimburse them.
Okay. But by law, does that other person have to give up the property? Or you can say, no, it's mine.
Yeah, because the original landowner didn't get due process.
Gotcha.
When the government
Now,
took
is
it
there
away.
a statute of limitations on that? Like, if this guy's been on it for 10 years, and then this guy shows up and says, no, that's mine, I want it back. I mean, at what point does the guy that's owned it for 10 years got some rights? You know what I mean?
So that's an interesting question.
Okay.
So after 10 years, yeah. So if somebody has what's called color of title, which a tax deed would be color of title, they've possessed it for 10 years, they've claimed it's openly to be theirs and nobody else's for 10 years, paid the taxes for 10 years, then that's called adverse possession.
Okay.
So, yeah, the tax sale itself probably has a statute of limitations of you have to contest it within so many years, probably fewer than 10.
Gotcha.
But I had a gentleman come in the other day, wanted to do a quiet title suit, and the title company sent him over to me. And I'm like, okay, well, what's the scoop? Well, these solar panel folks, want to put in some solar panels. They want to lease the property, and his name's not on the property. Okay, what's the story on that? Well, Granddad, back in the 30s, was neighbors, and some guy came out from Missouri with his wife and kids, and wife really didn't like it here and went back home to Missouri. And so neighbor says, well, I tell you what, if you'll just take care of the land and farm it, it's yours.
But they never signed over the actual deed or anything?
No deed, no written lease, no piece of paper, no color of title.
And it's probably, I know oral contracts are enforceable, but something like that, is that even possible?
Find the guy. I mean.
Well, and what's the odds that person even still alive at that point?
Yeah, so it's 7 to 90 years later.
Yeah.
But there's no color of title, so you can't have adverse possession. I mean, I don't know what you do at that point.
Man. It's almost kind of reminds me of like the cars without title type, how do you handle that? This is kind of the same scenario, but actually much bigger scale because we're talking more value here than a car, unless it's a Ferrari or something.
It's kind of an unfortunate situation.
It is. So what do you do about that? Does it default back to the original property owner's family or?
Well, the people have been paying the taxes on it since the 30s.
Yeah.
They've been in possession. They've been farming it. But for adverse possession, you have to have what's called color of title.
Yeah.
Some piece of paper, no matter how bad.
You just hope that the family of the other at some point just says, you know what? That sounds like something Uncle Roy would do. I'm going to sign off on it, basically.
Yeah, if you could find a great grandchild, sign a quick claim deed for $50.
Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe that's your color of title.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
But now, getting back to the other scenario where we're talking about the guy, how many years and all that. Now, let's be fair here. That man, the onus should have been on him saying, you know what, I own that piece of property. I haven't paid taxes on it in a while. Maybe I should investigate why that's the case. You know what I mean? Like I get the guy can come back and claim, but at the same time, you are responsible for your financial, obligations.
Right.
And just because you forgot to pay or whatever doesn't excuse you from not being dealing with the repercussions of not paying.
Did we not realize we weren't getting a tax bill? Hello?
Exactly. It's like, did you think they just forgot about you and said, I'm going to, I know enough to know about the government. Even if they forget for a while, they're going to remember at some point.
That's right.
And when they do remember, they're going to want it all at once.
Yeah. And it's all your fault.
It's all your fault.
That's right.
So I'm just thinking, anybody with any sense of logic is going to sit there and say, it's going to catch up with me, whether it's tomorrow or 10 years from now, I'm going to have to pay that piper. Maybe I should be proactive and try to nip it in the bud while I can control something versus when they're in control of it,
So I had another quiet title case, little old lady of Oklahoma, and granddad had owned 40 acres here in Chaves County. And they've been paying the taxes, but I don't think they'd been out to actually visit the property in 50 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so because there's people had passed away and there's not a paper chain of title of deeds and things, we had to do a quiet title into the current heirs. And so I'm thinking, well, this is about to get possibly nasty. What if there's some neighbor that's been running his horses
Sure.
for 50 years?
Yeah.
Plowing,
Sure.
or has got an orchard, or somebody, surely that land has just not sat vacant all this time.
Right. People are doing something to it.
Yeah, some neighbor's been using it for something. So I'm thinking, well, let's see, how do we address that potential problem if they're going to try to claim ownership somehow? So anytime you run a quiet title, you have to have a legal description and then a more commonly known as. So for those of you who don't get the newspaper is the place for legal notices. Mm-hmm. And if you see a foreclosure of a home, it'll have the legal description and more commonly known as the street address. Well, this 40 acres is out in the boondocks, right? But it's at the end of a road.
Right.
So we looked up the neighbors. And so he said 40 acres at the end of this road, and the neighbor to the north is, the neighbor to the east is, the neighbor to the south is, and west. So now we've named the neighbors in the suit. So if they think they have a claim on the property, they're on notice to make the claim or forever hold their peace.
Gotcha. Okay.
They can't claim they didn't know.
Gotcha.
So we did that, published in the paper, nobody complained, and rock and roll.
Life went on, and then if they did complain later, it's like, nope, we did these steps.
Right.
You chose to do nothing about them.
Your name's right here.
You surrendered your right to it by not doing it then.
Right.
So yeah,
we named all the neighbors. So how could you not know it was what we were talking about?
And when you name somebody, they get a certified letter saying as such, and so it's not like
well, not these folks, because we're using them to describe where the property was located.
Got you. Okay, very good. I got you. So, but yeah, it covers them legally. Basically, it's how that works.
I hope so.
It's the attempt to meet the letter of the law. Basically, is what they're trying to do. Which is why, and it's no different than like when you see at the city or the county commission or the city council or something do, like when they announce something, a public hearing or whatever, they have to do it according to the ordinances and things, the laws in essence.
Open Meeting Act.
Yeah. And so when they talk about, like, say they're going to do something like when they did the Recreation Aquatic Center, they had to put announcements out in the paper and everything else saying, we're going to, at the city council, we're going to be talking about the bidding contract of this thing here, and they have to do that by law.
Yep.
So public has ample opportunity to address them with concerns, comments, if
give
so
inputs. Right. Anytime they change the zoning laws, there's notice.
Yeah.
Zoning regs. Sorry.
Yeah. So and that's the truth with any ordinance, any county, city, doesn't matter. They have to, by law, publicly broadcast or let the public know that they're doing this, so the public has a chance to respond.
That's right. So whenever the city's going to, I don't know if they've proposed zoning regs for recreational marijuana sales yet or not.
They're working it, and I think they're done now. But
they'll be publicized.
Yeah, and they did all that. Now, actually, the balls, from the way I'm understanding, talking to some of the city folks there, is the city's ready. There's a couple of people in the middle of the application process, but none have completed it to open up yet.
Right.
So that's why we don't have any here in Roswell.
Yeah, that's what I've heard is nobody's finished the process.
Yeah, I heard 2 that are close, and there's some on the horizon, but as of this moment, and that was a week ago when I heard that.
Yeah,
I don't know where that's at now, but
don't know.
But I know that it's going to have to wait, because I think those steps that are waiting have to go before the next city council meeting and stuff. So what we're waiting for, I think, is the meeting this week for them to come and talk to them, and then I think after the city council meeting, that's going to move the needle for some of these to either open or be real close to open. So.
Maybe I think in the ETZ, I'm on the ETZ commission, and
Okay.
I think we're going to be hearing or looking at some regulations our next meeting.
Yeah, but I think with City Council, which is this Thursday, by the way, we're going to get the new mayor in and all that. We'll talk all about that. But I think if I remember, I had Kevin Mavers on, who's the city development director, for folks that don't know. And I think when he told me, he said there was one or two that are supposed to come up before this next city council meeting. And once that clear that process, I think they're good to go. But don't quote me on that. It's close to the end for some of them, and I think the city council meeting that's coming up is kind of the final piece in that puzzle.
So I had a legal education seminar, and they were talking about, this was several months ago, about the recreational stuff had been passed and was soon to become law. And so one of the first things that they tell you in the seminar is, remember, it's illegal at the federal level.
Yep.
And as an attorney, if you're giving legal advice to somebody who's breaking federal law and you're taking that money, that's drug money.
Oh, wow. I never thought about it that way. But yeah, that could impact you guys.
Well, that means they could seize my bank accounts if I'm taking drug money or some other attorney. So it's very scary stuff.
I know that's the kind of, a lot of the issues a lot of the cannabis companies are dealing with now is because they can't put their money in banks because most of them are FDIC insured.
You have to, can't put them in a federal bank.
Yeah, which I don't know. I don't know how many banks aren't. I just everywhere I look, every bank I know is FDIC insured. So I'm like, is there a lot of banks that aren't FDIC insured?
Well, there's some state banks.
Yeah. I just, I'm just thinking like the average Joe. You drive up the street and you got 10 banks on the road, and every one of them's FDIC. So where does a cannabis company keep their money? Either they got to build a hole in the backyard
or maybe there's an online bank somewhere.
Yeah.
But I don't know how they make deposits.
Convert it to, or launder it to some kind of something else, basically. Do what the mob does and launder it. That's the only thing they can do. So,
sticky stuff.
So it's going to be a sticky wicket next couple years till the feds get on board, which I think they will at some point. I think at some point the feds are going to, if it's not, one administration is going to go in there and they're going to, just like the states do at some point. I think it's going to happen. It's just a question of when, in my opinion. But
in the seminar, they were talking about the banks in Colorado, and the banks have to report like monthly to some regulatory agency about the marijuana sales.
Yeah.
And so the banks monitor those accounts from the marijuana stores, report it monthly to the state. And if the bank sees anything, quote, funny going on, they have to shut that account down.
Wow. So what's stopping the feds from not just going in to these non-FDIC and raid their banks, go to the accounts and just start shutting down? I mean, they were well within the law to do it. Is it political why they're not doing it, or I'm just curious?
During the Obama administration, there was an administrative rule directing the Department of Justice not to prosecute.
Gotcha. So they basically told them, said lay off, let them do their thing.
Yeah.
And even though we'll look the other way, I guess, basically.
Yeah, that's when so many states were adopting the medical stuff. They just,
Gotcha.
DOJ was instructed just look the other way.
Yeah. Well, I get it with medical. I mean, if the FDI, if all the CDCs and all that can say, hey, these are benefits and all that, then let the feds, as far as I'm concerned, they should be able to put their money in a federal bank and everything, because it's a medicine, and it's been treated as such, and it's federally said it's a medicine by your entity of saying that.
And there's some types of pain that's the only thing that works.
Yeah. I mean, now the recreational, treat it the way they do booze.
Well, they do.
Yeah.
And, fans in Radio Land, you can't drive under the influence of weed, just like you can't drive under the influence of booze.
Yeah.
Booze is more associated with domestic violence than weed is.
Yeah, because weed don't really associate violence with weed. Just,
right.
Usually, unless you're a Cheeto, then then you might get pretty violent on it. But what about that?
but smoking, it does mess with a person's brain. It is not good for you, just like excessive alcohol use isn't good for you.
Absolutely. It does alter your mind.
Yeah.
And it alters your state of decision-making abilities. And for that, it is dangerous.
Yeah, they've actually found that in the Netherlands. It used to be, all that stuff used to be legal, but about 10 or 15 years ago, for foreign university students, they said smoking dope's no longer legal.
Interesting.
And then they followed the students who did and who didn't smoke dope, and the ones who were smoking dope got lower grades.
Yeah. I can tell you, my opinion, once you're we got to go. But, once you're an adult, do what you want. But there's a reason why kids don't need access to drugs and alcohol, and it's because you are physically hurting yourself down the road. If you're an adult
Absolutely.
doing it, then it's I'm an American. I believe you get to choose with how you live your life and do your thing, and
As long as you don't hurt somebody else.
as long as you don't hurt somebody else, God bless you. That's the way I see it. But as if you're under 21, your brain isn't full. Even if you're in a full woman or man's body, your brain, there's still parts of your body that is still developing, still putting the finishing touches on, so to speak. And cannabis and alcohol and all that can really hinder that development.
Yep.
So until you matured and you're old enough to the part where you start going downhill instead of uphill, then you know what I mean?
It's time to stop before that. Good idea. Stop before that's supposed to go. Yeah.
When you're at the part where they keep giving you more drugs to take care of ailments, then do your thing.
Oh, jeez.
But do you have a fact or fiction for us there?
Yes. Okay. So, up until 1972, in New Mexico,
Okay.
a deed of property to a married man was presumed to be community property, including the wife.
Gotcha.
However, in contrast, on the other hand, a deed of real estate to a married woman was presumed to be her sole and separate property.
Interesting.
Until 1972. What happened in 1972?
I do know.
The Equal Rights Act.
Ah, okay.
So the legislature told women, oh, you want to be equal? Well, then from now on, a deed to a married woman is going to be considered community property.
Nice. So you don't get to hide your stuff either. You got to share it like the dudes do.
There you go. Equal rights. Welcome to it. So BristolLawOffice.com.
Yeah. If you need help, questions, anything, Matt, it doesn't cost to talk to him. Give him a call, reach out, BristolLawOffice.com, and then he'll tell you if you need to come in for a meeting and do something more. He might just say, no, you just got to go to the clerk's office and get a form, and you're good to go.
Mike, thank you so much. Enjoyed it.
As always, appreciate it, Matt. We'll see you next month, and enjoy the warmer weather here. Hopefully get some more golfing in.
And don't get blown away.
That's right. Yeah, exactly here. And good news is scouts will be camping and stuff more soon here now that the weather's getting nicer.
Absolutely.
That'd be a good thing.
Yep.
So very good. Well, thank you, Matt. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. It is closing in on 8 o'clock.